Climbing Gold is a production of Duct Tape and Beer, with support from The North Face. Never stop exploring. Dr. Squatch, get dirty, stay clean. Koros, explore perfection. And Element, restoring health through hydration.
Alex, do you remember watching the Olympics as a kid?
I do actually remember, because I always watched on my cousin's TV. We were always up in Lake Tahoe, and anyway, my cousins had a cabin with a TV, and it's like basically the summer activity we always watched in my cousin's living room. And so, yeah, I feel like it was a whole family thing. We always watched the Olympics. Well, yeah, we basically never watched TV unintentionally. Like, we would watch specific things every now and again, like specific shows or whatever. Mm-hmm. But definitely watching the Olympics stands out as something that we'd see every few years.
Yeah. Why do you think that the Olympics still keeps your attention?
I mean, I personally just love seeing human excellence, and the Olympics really showcases human excellence in a very niche range of activities. It's like the world's best person at doing some weird thing, like jumping over obstacles that are set a certain distance apart. You're like, that's weird, but that person is really, really good at doing that weird thing.
Yeah, or curling.
Whatever. Curling's not a thing. Yeah, I mean, some of the things in the Olympics I think are stupid, but in general, it's just cool to see anybody who's devoted their life to doing something incredibly well.
Yeah.
The other thing with the Olympics is just that I love athletics. It's like, I mean, I'm a professional athlete. I love physical movement. And so I think seeing Olympic gymnasts, Olympic runners, Olympic swimmers, people who are incredible at using their body in the way that they want it to perform. I don't know. It's cool to see.
Yeah. So this season, we're doing a mini-series on the Summer Games in Paris. This is the second time climbing has been in the Olympics, and we've been working over the last 6 months to bring you some incredible stories and insights into this side of our sport.
I think that for a lot of old school climbers, sort of old school outdoor trad climbers, whatever, they see competition climbing as not that cool. Indoor climbing is not real climbing. But one of the themes that we've consistently explored on Climbing Gold is this tension between athleticism and adventure, or kind of the pendulum swinging back and forth between the athletic side of climbing and the adventurous side of climbing. And what we're finding interviewing all these Olympians is that their degree of athleticism is so high because competition just brings out the highest level of talent and skill in these climbers. And then that allows them to have the biggest adventures if they want to. And I think that's what's so interesting about exploring the competitive side of climbing, is that in a lot of ways, the competition scene is the engine that's sort of driving the growth of the sport right now, that's driving progress, that's driving the rapid growth in grades. It's like the things that people are able to do nowadays is largely driven by the competition scene. Yeah. And that's what we're diving into.
Yeah. And we'll touch on speed climbing, because that's a perfect example, because it has this incredible overlay between what happens on man-made walls, but then also what you do on El Cap, right? And so we'll kind of cover some of the speed side and go back in time in that journey, and then take us to the future where all these world records are just falling.
We've gone deep with a lot of the athletes, and it's been super interesting for me personally just to learn about training and how they perform at such a high level. It's also often very stressful or sort of nerve-wracking, or just, what do you call it, like everyone's so neurotic. Like there's so much
anxious,
so much stress. Yeah, anxious. Yeah. It makes me anxious. Totally.
Yeah.
It's like some of the competitors are just under so much stress to perform, and like national pride and pressure and like family pressure, like who knows what. But basically, it seems like most competitors are dealing with a tremendous amount of external pressure in one way or another. I mean, I suppose anyone who's competing at the Olympics is dealing with tremendous pressure. And so talking to the athletes has been, super interesting, super inspiring, but also, it's a lot.
Yeah. And you're going to be in Paris for the games and sending us some updates too. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I'm supposed to be in Paris interviewing competitors for the Olympic Broadcast Service, basically for some of the network coverage. I'll be interviewing competitors and chatting with folks and doing social content and who knows what, hoping to translate climbing for the masses in some way. And so in theory, I'll be able to talk to folks for wonderful Climbing Gold as well.
Yeah. It's almost like you're trying out for your true second chapter goal, which is to become an announcer.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I do love talking about climbing, so who knows?
A lot of the interviews we've done, it has been, I would just say, while sometimes anxiety-inducing, it's mostly been fun. It's entertainment, right? But do you think that when you look back on a historic level, do you think that the Olympics can be something more than just sport, entertainment, fun?
For the right groups, the Olympics can be tremendous source of inspiration, tremendous source of national pride, tremendous source of togetherness. I mean, I think the Olympics are supposed to embody the spirit of togetherness through sport, like bringing the world together through healthy competition. And I think that the Olympics certainly has the potential to be more than just sport.
Yeah, and there has been through time some obviously very important, profound moments. There's the 1968 Olympics where Tommy Smith and John Carlos raised their fists in the Black Power salute to draw attention to Black poverty in America. It's one of the most iconic photos ever taken in sport. There's a miracle on ice when the U.S. hockey team beats the Soviet Union during the height of the Cold War. And going all the way back to Berlin in 1936, Jesse Owens wins 4 gold medals in front of Hitler, dismantles the myth of Aryan supremacy in athletics in front of the world. These are huge moments. Like, my kids are still reading about them in history books. It is sometimes sort of tempting to look at sport or something like the Olympics as just sort of this ridiculous spectacle. But I think there is something truly deeper with it. Every culture plays sport like in humanity, right? Every culture has language. Every culture has some form of art. And I think there's something so deeply human about it. And this is the moment where a lot of the world, not all of it, but a lot of the world comes together. And for some people, it means almost everything. There is one athlete's Olympic journey that means a bit more than some of the other competitors, where an entire country, an entire climbing community is going to be pulling for her. Jenya Kazbekova.
Jenya Kazbekova is a Ukrainian national champion. She sport climbed 14 plus outdoors, on size 13 plus. Basically, she's been climbing at an elite level and competing on the World Cup scene. She's qualified for the Paris Olympics and is a major source of pride for the Ukrainian people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. On one hand, Ukraine is at war. It needs resources in order to defend itself. And I guess it can be easy to say, like, why does this matter now? But it is hard to put a price on hope.
Well, I think that's one of the interesting things that we talked to Jenya about, is that tension between whether or not climbing is even worthwhile at a time of war. And yet, I think we all felt like it probably is. It's like, what better could she be doing at home? I mean, she's one of the best rock climbers in the world. Why not put her talent to use on the biggest possible global stage? And particularly in an Olympics this year where there is no Russian national team because of their unprovoked aggression in Ukraine. I mean, to have an opportunity for her to wave the Ukrainian flag in front of the world, I mean, it's a tremendous opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and that's why all these interviews have been so intense. I'm Alex Honnold.
I'm Fitzka Hall.
Welcome to Paris. This is Climbing Gold.
At the age of 8, I came to my parents and I was like, I want to be like you. Your life looks amazing to me and I just want to do whatever you do. And from that age, they started coaching me and mentoring and helping me attend all the competitions and do all the things that I need to become a professional climber. My name is Jenya Kazbekova. I am a professional competition climber from Ukraine. My parents used to compete at World Cups and World Championships and do climbing professionally. But before that, my grandma, she was a champion of USSR in speed multi-pitching. If you watch the Red Bull Dual Ascent, that's basically what my grandma did, but on actual rock. And she was really good at it. Yeah, so that's kind of my family history with climbing. I honestly do not remember myself not climbing. I just went and traveled everywhere with them for all the competitions and all of their rock climbing adventures. So I grew up in this community and doing climbing probably before I was able to walk.
Are your parents still climbing? Is your family still, do you climb with your family?
Yeah, so my family is still very much involved in climbing and around climbing. My grandparents are coaches of kids groups back in my hometown in Dnipro. My grandma is over 75 years old and she's still coaching and she's a really good coach. She has raised a few world champions. So and my parents are also still climbing. They are coaching my sister, my younger sister. She is 15 now, and she's entering the youth competitions on the world level. Our lives are just deeply intertwined with climbing.
We've talked to a lot of people who have grown up in climbing families, but I don't know if we've heard from any climbing grandparents. Like, I don't know anybody whose grandmother was a champion.
I know, yeah, it's pretty special.
Can you just help us understand what the climbing scene is like where you grew up in Ukraine?
So Ukraine has a very big mountaineering community, and that comes from USSR and how in USSR the community in general of mountaineering and climbing was very tight.
Are there big mountains in Ukraine?
There are no big mountains. Our biggest mountain is 2,800 meters in the west of Ukraine.
So that's a legitimately small mountain
It's
in
like
the grand scheme of mountains.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, whenever our alpinists would like go somewhere, they would have to travel far and do expeditions. But then we always had access to Crimea, and Crimea has amazing rock climbing, different types of rocks, a lot of different crags. So that's kind of where I grew up, and that's the biggest part of the climbing community. That's what united us all and made us all fall in love with climbing, really, because I grew up on those rocks. All of my first achievements were on those rocks, and that comes for generations because my grandma had the same experience and my parents who met in Crimea also.
And your parents had a climbing hostel or something, or like a business in Crimea?
Yeah, they have a hostel and an outdoor shop.
And they still do?
They wanted to retire there. So now it's way more complicated. We haven't been there for years now, and we have a person that is taking care of it at there right now, but really we don't know what's going to happen with it. We do not have access to it, and it's all...
Yeah, because it was annexed by Russia.
This month does mark 10 years since Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine. Since then,
Explain that
Russia
actually for listeners who may not know what happened in Crimea.
So Crimea is a Ukrainian territory that was annexed by Russia in 2014. Basically, Russia came with their army and guns and said, oh, okay, let's now vote if you want to be Russia, with the soldiers standing on the streets. And more than half of the people were super afraid and didn't even go to voting. And then the old generation that used to be in USSR went and voted. As always, there are two sides to any country, left wing and right wing. And in Crimea, it was the same way. There were people that wanted to be Russia, and then there were people that didn't care, and then there were people that were really Ukrainians and had to flee Crimea.
Hundreds of thousands of people who opposed Russian rule fled. Among them were the indigenous...
Basically, they annexed Crimea, and for 8 years it was an occupied territory that wasn't recognized by Ukraine, that it was Russia, and it wasn't recognized by the rest of the world.
It's almost like it's as if the UK held a Brexit vote with soldiers on the streets and people menacing. You're kind of like, oh, it's a very big vote with a very heavy military influence.
Exactly.
You can see how that's crazy. Where were you when Russia began its invasion of Ukraine?
It was unprovoked, but this is what Russian President Vladimir Putin unleashed on Ukraine.
I was in Kyiv, in our capital, with my mom and my sister. We had an official training camp. For a few weeks before that, there was so much anxiety in the air. You could actually feel it, you could touch it. That's what it felt like. Everyone was worried. Everyone was like, oh, is it going to happen or not? We did have a plan of what to do, how to escape. Like the cars were always filled up with gas. The family kind of divided into my grandparents not wanting to leave because it's their home, and my parents being like, well, we don't want to leave because we have all the businesses, our home is here, like everything is here, but also like we gotta make sure that our kids are in safety.
A helicopter assault on an airport outside of Kiev. Close.
We were in Kiev and we woke up from the explosions, from the sound of explosions at 5 a.m. in the morning. And both me and my mom looked at each other and was like, what was that? Like, what are those sounds? And then we just laid there for a minute and it happened again. And we pulled out our phones and the news were just all over the place. I remember having like all of my stuff like all over the apartment that we were renting and trying to pack it with my hands shaking from fear and the unknown, the uncertainty, what's going to happen in the next minute. We packed up the car, took my sister and started driving towards Poland. Obviously, everyone was very scared and everyone was panicking and everyone was trying, the people that could leave, they were trying to leave. And like the roads were crazy. People started driving on the wrong side of the road to get out faster. And it was a mad situation. And then we get to the border with Poland and there is this huge 5-kilometer line of cars and you are moving every few minutes for like 5 meters forward. And there is no food, there is no way to stop or rest. And we just kept changing with my mom and kept driving, arriving in Germany fully exhausted after this experience, but also kind of realizing what a privilege it was that we had a car, that we were able to escape. My grandparents, my dad stayed behind and was helping bring people to the border, driving them from my hometown to Poland and coming back. And yeah, the next few weeks were like surreal and such a blur. We were trying to like get as many people out as we could, like all of the climbing kids and teenagers that we cared about, to get them out of there, because obviously it's hard to flee with the whole family. Most of the parents were really concerned to at least send off their kids to safety.
And what were you mostly feeling when the invasion started?
A lot of fear at first. And then when I was in safety, I felt a lot of anger. Like I was like really, really angry. There wasn't like devastation and giving up. It was like an overwhelming feeling of like, what the fuck? And I just wanted the whole world to stop and resolve this. Hard to talk about. And heartbreaking was to see that the world didn't stop and everyone kept going and nothing really changed. Like it was in the news everywhere, but like everyone kept going. Like everyone started to feel like it's the new normal, which is an awful thing to say.
We'll be back with more after the break. Climbing Gold is brought to you by the North Face. I've been a North Face athlete for almost 18 years, and this summer you can join me and the North Face for a celebration of climbing, culture, and community at CLIM Fest. We're sending it big in the Big Apple at the Brooklyn Bridge Park on August 23rd and 24th. Watch her compete in an epic competition that sees athletes race to the top of a 55-foot wall over the water. On the ground, we've got DJ sets, food, exclusive merch, freestanding boulders to climb, and panel discussions led by my fellow North Face athletes and me. Whether you're happiest on the wall or the ground, don't miss the climbing event of the summer. Visit www.thenorthface.com and check out their events section for more info. Or check out our show notes for the link. Hope to see you there. Element is a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mix formulated with a science-backed ratio of sodium to potassium to magnesium. Each packet delivers a meaningful dose of electrolytes free of sugar, artificial colors, or other dodgy ingredients. It tastes great, and I've used it extensively on expeditions. And my 2-year-old loves it and calls it sprinkle water. Element is formulated for anyone looking to restore health through hydration and is perfectly suited for athletes, folks who are fasting, or those who follow keto, low-carb, whole food, or paleo diets. Try Element totally risk-free. If you don't like it, they'll refund your order, no questions asked. Get your free sample pack with any Element purchase at drinkelement.com/climbinggold. Be sure to try the new Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water. That's drinklmnt.com/climbinggold.
The basic premise was the fact that for me, climbing means joy. Like, however rubbish you're feeling, if you go climbing, you tend to feel better. But war tends to mean death and pain. And I slowly started to discover that although there was a war going on in Ukraine, there was still climbing there.
Matt Groom is the IFSC commentator. You know him from the live streams if you've ever watched any climbing competitions online. He is the charming British voice giving you the play-by-play of who, I mean, honestly, the fact that he has a nice British accent makes him sound so much more distinguished.
Yeah, 10% smarter right out of the gate.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Through his work announcing World Cups and interviewing athletes, Matt got interested in what was happening in Ukraine with the climbing community. He knew some of the elite climbers had gone to the front lines, but competition, it was continuing, so Matt decided to step severely outside of his comfort zone and visit Ukraine, camera in tow. His film, Climbing Never Die, toured with Real Rock this last year. If you haven't seen it, it's powerful and definitely worth a watch.
Like, I read an article on UKC saying they'd opened a new climbing wall in Odessa, which at that moment was getting heavily, heavily bombed. And then obviously all year I've been commentating on the Ukrainian athletes, and I just started to wonder, how are they making that work? And psychologically, how are they dealing with the fact that their country, they can't be in their country and yet they're still competing? And then I heard that there was the Ukraine Nationals taking place, and they'd asked various athletes who were in Europe to come back to Ukraine to compete. And I just thought that was a really bizarre thing to do, because despite how important competitions are, surely the chance of getting killed isn't worth that.
Members of the Ukrainian national team were spread across Europe. Jenya bounced between the United Kingdom with her mom and her sister, the World Cup circuit, and Salt Lake City here in the States. By that time, the Ukrainian military had turned the tables on the Russian invasion. The front lines had been pushed far to the east of Kyiv, where the war continued to rage. While the Ukrainian government has kept casualty figures closely guarded, publicly they've acknowledged that 30,000 Ukrainians have died fighting. Western intelligence believes that number is a fair amount higher. But to give a sense, for Russian soldiers, many who were conscripted or pulled right from prison, the casualties have been astronomical. U.S. intelligence estimates that 350,000 Russian fighters have died, and British intelligence thinks that's closer to 500,000. There is a very active war going on. Matt's curiosity over how climbing could feel so necessary that Ukraine would host climbing nationals given the state of what was happening proved to be worthy. The film followed his journey from the relative safety of nationals to Kharkiv, with stops at gyms and training centers along the way.
I watched it with some friends and family, and at the end, we all had things to talk about it because it was sort of an open-ended. It didn't tell you what you should think about. It sort of left it open for you to explore. Because, I mean, I think that's kind of at the heart of the film is like, is sport worth pursuing in a war zone? That's like the central question of the film. And it doesn't really provide an answer. I mean, it certainly shows the hope that sport can provide maybe, but it does seem a little bit ridiculous in the face of the death and the bombings and all the other things happening.
Not to exaggerate the situation there, but it's genuinely dangerous the whole time. And you could make that decision to go to a climbing wall and you could end up dead. I understood that people needed it. And I figured that would be obvious from the beginning. And I was right with that. It's like it gave people an outlet. But it's just like, I don't think I could do it. And I kept saying to people who would go into gyms, I was like, look, why are you doing this? Because for me, I couldn't understand it. People a little bit know who I am sometimes, and especially in the climbing world. And when I walk into a gym in Ukraine, people were just like, what the hell are you doing here? And they'd let me into their lives and they'd show me, and the trust they allowed me was huge. So I don't think you could go and do something like that and it wouldn't change you. I had a lot of time to think about the stupid, selfish things I'd done in my life over my life, and you realize how petty and small they are.
For those Ukrainian athletes like Jenya, far from home, still competing for their countries, those feelings of confusion were magnified to extremes.
Climbing in the beginning of invasion, whenever it started, I really lost purpose in climbing. I didn't understand why would I be doing this? Why would I keep competing when people in my country are dying? It just felt useless. Competition climbing was always about, fulfilling my potential, joy of it, the connection with people. There are so many things that I enjoy about it. And suddenly I find myself in a position where I do not allow myself to enjoy it because I feel guilty for it. Because how can I enjoy something when the war is going on? So for months after full invasion, I felt really lost, and my heart and my head wasn't in competitions at all. I was doing it just to keep doing it because the world kept going. No one paused. No one was like, okay, now we don't do competitions, let's figure this out. So it felt wrong to me. And I even remember questioning if I should compete at the European Championships in Munich in August, because it just felt like I'm not feeling it anymore. Like, what is it that I want? I'm very much in tune with myself. And here I find myself in a position where I'm like, I don't fucking know. I don't know if I should be doing this. I do not enjoy it anymore. And honestly, looking back, so many athletes have retired in the first half a year of the invasion because they were not able to answer those questions for themselves. And at the time, what really helped was my current coach, Malik. Malik Talib, he is from Lebanon, and he fled Lebanon when he was 18 to go to Canada because of the war.
Malik also coaches for the Canadian national team.
So I knew Malik from a few years before that, and we kind of became friends and became closer. And then whenever the full invasion started, talking to him felt like he really understands, because you can talk to people about it and people can care and they can try their hardest to understand what you're going through, but unless they lived through it, they have no idea. And that's what made it so different, because Malik, he didn't just know what I'm going through, he had the same experience, and without even me talking about it, he knew what I'm feeling and what I'm going through. So it made perfect sense, that I felt really close to him, and that it was really a deciding factor that I trusted someone with my preparation for Paris, someone who knows where I'm at. And we talked about, being my coach. And the first real conversation that happened was him trying to walk me out of my darkness with competition climbing, trying to answer all of those questions that I had, that I was like, I don't know if I can keep doing it. I don't know if there is any point to keep doing it. And the point that he brought to me was that me being back in Ukraine wouldn't help much. But me being here, showing up for competitions, wearing my Ukrainian uniform, and doing well is a representation of Ukraine in the world. I can remind the world that the war is still going on and we still need your support. We still need your donations. We still need you to stand by us. It also is a hope for Ukraine to see Ukraine being represented at the world stage, to see that people are fighting and we are on all fronts. We care and we want the world to not forget about us and see how resilient Ukraine and Ukrainians can be.
Those early days and months of the war, you went through a lot of emotions, the fear, the anger. Has that evolved in the last 2 years?
I was afraid that Ukraine is not going to last even a few days. All of us were afraid of it. I mean, look at the sizes of Russia against Ukraine. It's fucking massive. And we were all thinking that, I don't know, maybe there is not going to be a Ukraine in the next few weeks. And then Ukraine stood up like I've never seen even in history, I've never seen anything like that. We united and we fought hard. And I felt so much pride. I felt so much pride to be Ukrainian, to be from this country that is fighting so hard for its freedom. It was inspiring to see and heartbreaking at the same time, because so many lives have been given to that. So many futures that are never going to happen because of such a just useless war. I'm still feeling very much overwhelmed and very much angry, and lots of different feelings that I have experienced and had to process over the last 2 years.
That national pride that you describe, the pride in seeing Ukraine resist the invasion and still exist 2 years later, did that national pride exist before the invasion? Did you feel that same pride 10 years ago, or is that sort of as a result of the invasion?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually, because, as you know, Ukraine for so many years was a part of USSR, so we had a huge influence from Russia. Russia was trying to wipe Ukrainian language off, trying to unite us all in being one country. And for a while, I didn't really understand it, like, especially like as a teenager, like you don't really understand why you speak Russian. You just speak Russian. You've always spoken Russian. You've always also spoken Ukrainian. You had both languages. That just was normal. And then when the unofficial invasion started, the one in 2014, the one that Russia said that they had nothing to do with, you were like, oh wait, what is going on? This is weird. Like, what does this mean? And we still didn't realize it because it happened on the very east of Ukraine, far away from it. And it felt like, oh, is it really happening? I think it's happening. So talking about pride to be Ukrainian, like, I mean, I've been competing for Ukraine since I was 14 years old. I've been wearing Ukrainian uniform, but it never meant as much as it means right now. And the pride that I had, I remember being like, oh, Ukraine is great, it's my home. But, it would be amazing to get out of Ukraine and, go somewhere else where there are better opportunities, where there are better infrastructure for climbing, where I can achieve my goals and all of these things. I was trying to really get out of Ukraine, as many of us, because it felt like there is a better world, there is a better future somewhere else. And then once the full invasion started, that feeling changed. This feeling that united us, that made us know, like, we are Ukrainians, we are proud to be Ukrainians. Ukraine is gonna stand up and fight for the right of being Ukraine. That, I think, changed a lot for a lot of people. And my pride grew immensely at the time. Like, you're right, 10 years ago, I wouldn't feel that way. I feel it now because we are facing an enemy. We are facing a threat. We know that united we are stronger. So yeah, that did change, and in that way, I'm really proud of my country in the way it did. Like, it is navigating and going through such a hard time.
The inner conflict and open conflict seemed to play out in Jenya's climbing. She was drifting between situations. Her results were erratic. On her very best days, she seemed like a long shot for Paris. On her worst, it didn't seem like a reality. Opportunities to qualify came and went, but things began to shift. Malik joined her as her coach. She settled into life in Salt Lake, where she trained with USA Climbing at the training center. One final opportunity to qualify for the combined lead and bouldering discipline loomed on the horizon, the Olympic Qualifier Series. 2 grueling 4-day events, one in Shanghai and one in Budapest. Before all that, the Ukrainian Nationals. That's the same event that piqued Matt Groom's attention.
We'll be back with more after the break. I first found Kororo when I was looking for a GPS watch that could track my biggest outdoor adventures. I needed something with a massive battery life that was also robust enough to handle the climbing. As it turns out, Kororo is the only GPS watch brand that has done some serious development for climbers, from multi-pitch GPS tracking to indoor programmed workouts. The watches have a mind-blowing battery life. The Vertex watch series lasts for more than 100 hours in GPS activities, so I only need to charge it once every several weeks. I only need to charge my watch so sporadically that I can never find the charger, because I haven't used it in 6 weeks. If you're interested in bringing new technology into your climbing training and tracking, you should consider their new Vertex 2S. Go to Koros.com and use the code CLIMBINGGOLD to secure a free watch carabiner with the purchase of your new Vertex 2S. The link's in the show notes. Dr. Squatch crafts natural, high-performance personal care products with no harmful ingredients. I don't shower often, but when I do, I use Dr. Squatch. I especially like the Wood Barrel Bourbon Bar Soap. From soap to shampoo to conditioner, they help me look, feel, and smell my best for whatever adventure I choose. They're offering new customers 20% off any purchase with the code CLIMBINGGOLD, or you can go to drsquatch.com/climbinggold. The link's in the show notes. Dr. Squatch. Get dirty, stay clean. How has it felt for you to go back to Ukraine in the last years to compete for the Ukrainian nationals? Like, what does it feel like to go home and compete while your country is still in open conflict?
Yeah, the first time I came back to Ukraine, it was 1 year after the full invasion started. And I had a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety going to Ukraine because honestly, like outside of Ukraine, all you know about it is what you read in the news, and news are terrifying, and you really go into unknown. But an interesting thing happened, like with all the worry that I had before going there. Once I was in Ukraine, it felt great. It felt right. It felt like I'm back home. And there was this crazy reality right in front of me with buildings being destroyed and missiles. And you could see the scars of the war on the cities and on people. But at the same time, you could see just people keep going, that they're going to their jobs, they are living their life, and they keep going. And you're like, wow, this is crazy. Like, it's nothing like I imagined. People are adapting a lot. I mean, this is our psychology. This is something that is really amazing about human beings, is that we adapt really well. So yeah, it felt weird but right at the same time, and it felt so good to see my grandparents and my friends and everyone who stayed back in Ukraine. So yeah, it meant I actually really love going back to Ukraine.
In the last 6 months, you've been on fire. It's almost like you've taken that strength and determination of the Ukrainian people and poured it into your climbing. How have you been received when you've gone back to Ukraine for nationals? Like do people show up?
Honestly, it's really cute to see. Since I've been last in Ukraine during our nationals, so many people showed up to watch finals and to cheer, and so many people came over to me and told me that it is amazing what I'm doing, and they're so grateful that I keep going. And for them, it is an amazing, like, it's a hope to see, this representation, to see me do well, because for them, it's not just my personal success, it's kind of a national Ukrainian success. And it's cute, like people would go rock climbing and then would film how they're watching a live stream from Shanghai in the middle of the woods. Cheering for me while they're rock climbing, and my heart is just full of, and really I feel a lot of warmth, and I feel really, really supported by Ukraine and the Ukrainian climbing community at the moment.
At the final Olympic qualifier series in Budapest, Jenya sat on the cusp of gaining one of the 10 spots still left for the women.
Big spring up, right hand holding the flag, that's powerful stuff, and she's going to get this.
In Shanghai, she placed 6th overall. In Budapest, Jenya placed 8th overall, sending her to Paris. She will be joined by fellow Ukrainian speed climber Yaroslav Klach.
What do you think it means for Ukrainians to have Ukrainian athletes competing on the international stage?
So it's massive. And this is something, so the central character in the themes is Daniel Boldyrev, who's this speed climber who used to be the best in the world. And the film comes right at the end of his career, really. And he told me numerous times, he's had these debates because he's a big, strong guy and he's of fighting age. And you could see throughout our process there that he was really struggling. He didn't necessarily admit it, but he was struggling with the fact that, why aren't I fighting when other people are dying? And I think for him, he saw competing as a way of fighting on a different kind of stage. It was by winning competitions, he could show everyone that Ukraine wasn't giving up, that they're strong people, that they care. With the other athletes I know, with the ones I know and I've talked to, that theme runs throughout. I haven't talked to all of them. So, for example, Jenya, who's doing so well in the OQS series at the moment, I don't know exactly if that's it for her, but I would imagine it's that same kind of thing. It's a pride, and it's a way to say, there are people who are fighting on the battlefield and dying, and yet I am raising the profile of Ukraine and what's going on there in a different way. So I think that's how a lot of them approach it. And there's so much pride. They are prideful people. And every time they stand up there on that podium and the national anthem plays, you can just see how much it means to them. It's huge for the country. And it's also huge for funding for a lot of Ukrainian athletes, because the funding has kind of dried up. So to get an athlete to that level of competition would mean that the life of the Ukraine climbing team can continue. And it just inspires everyone who's watching her back at home.
Does it feel like you sort of gain strength from seeing home, seeing how people have adapted, how people are persevering through the war?
Oh, for sure. Yes, it leaves me with no excuses, I gotta be strong because I am in a better position than most of people of Ukraine right now. And there is no way I can give up when they are still going.
Yeah. Do you think about that explicitly? Like, you specifically think about that when you're training for comps?
Sometimes, yeah, especially on hard days. Ukrainian people are unbreakable. No matter how much you push, we're just gonna push back harder.
You mentioned that people have, life goes on. There's a lot of conflict in the world right now. Do you worry that the world is going to forget about Ukraine? Why shouldn't we stop thinking about Ukraine?
Yeah, that's the hard part, is that there's a lot of messed up things going right now in the world. And it's hard to see how people are treating it as if there is room only for one conflict, the attention only for one conflict in the world. But that's bullshit. The war in Ukraine matters as much as what's going on in Palestine, as much as what's going on in Lebanon, as much as what's going on in all the countries that are struggling right now. And I do not feel like, oh no, they're stealing the spotlight. No, we fucking need spotlight on all of these places. We need help for everything. We need to stop it globally. And I'm obviously Ukraine is the closest to me because I am Ukrainian, because I'm from that country, but I do not wish just for it to stop in Ukraine. Once you experience something like that on your own skin, you care for each fucking conflict that is going on around the world, because you know what people are going through. And you're like, no, no one should be going through this. Am I scared that people are going to forget about Ukraine? Yeah, maybe. And that's maybe why I'm also keep showing up and keep doing it, because I do not want the world to forget. But I also don't think that we need to only think about Ukraine. We do need to think about everyone.
Earlier you were talking about when you were younger, thinking about I want to kind of escape Ukraine, or kind of go explore the world. And how has your appreciation for home changed and deepened in the last few years?
Yeah, it changed massively. I mean, I used to think that I want to live anywhere else but in Ukraine, and now I wish I would be able to live in Ukraine. It's as simple as that. I miss home, and I wish there would be no war, and I could be living at home and then traveling from home all over the place, all over the world. Because no matter how welcomed I feel in other places and how nice people are here, to me, home is home.
Thank you, Jenya, for sharing your experiences and perspectives with us. We're going to be rooting for you in Paris. Climbing Gold is a production of Duct Tape and Beer. Alex Honnold is our host. Our production and editing team includes the talents of Lauren Delaney Miller, Marco Seiler Gonzalez, and Evan Phillips. Skylar Perwins is our YouTube and social media editor. Music today by Brendan O'Connell, Padelm, Gossamer Tree, Gideon Finch, and Joya. Tracks are courtesy of the artists or Track Club. Our creative director is me, Fetzka Hall. Our executive producers are Jonathan Retzik and Ben Endy for RXR Sports, and Lisi Hendricks and Becca Cahal for Duct Tape and Beer. Thanks for listening.